This is Mark Livesey, and you're listening to the Gritty Bowmen.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Someone tell me where the Humane Society of the United States has ever bought 1 acre of habitat, where they have ever funded one project that got rid of invasive weed species, where they've ever funded one project that got rid of the Asian carp in the Illinois River. I mean,
none of it.
Pick whatever it is. They've got net assets in the hundreds of millions, and they've never done anything.
I did this whole series of posts of the hierarchy of dead animals on Instagram, on social media. So I had like a picture of chicken. No one cares. Like dead, like chicken meat. A picture of chicken. A picture of fish, like cut up fish. No one cares. A picture of an actual fish. Still, no one seems to give a picture of a dead turkey. No one seemed to care. It seemed like But then I showed bear meat. And I showed some bear meat that was just in a bag. What about that? And I'm like, now we're getting weird, right? Well, it's just meat, but it says bear on it. This is bear meat.
Yeah.
We care about wildlife. We care about landscapes. We care about all the things that are necessary for conservation. We'll tax ourselves 11%.
But if I showed an actual bear, like we posted some pictures of he's taking me bear hunting, actual bears that I've killed. Gee, I've never had anything in my life where people get mad at me more.
Well, you know what I try to tell people, and especially people that are new to it or are kind of intimidated by, smoking and grilling, is it's much like just cooking in the best flavored oven you've ever cooked in. Because it's 100% wood fire without us having to go out there and, chop down a couple of cords of wood,
Yep.
And so treat it like an oven from the point of view of 250, 275, 300 degrees. But then you're creating all that flavor with the wood fire, so you're getting the heat and the flavor. And because of that convection cook, that's how you're able to retain a lot of that moisture, and you don't end up with, this dry or overcooked meat.
Pellets are formed naturally by the heat and pressure.
When you
of
say
those
dyes,
animals.
you're not talking about coloring dyes. You're talking about dyes, molds.
Correct,
Yes.
a mold, yeah.
Putting it in the cooler, wrapping it in foil.
Mm-hmm.
What's that about?
Food off a Traeger is really like smoke-kissed, not smoke-drenched.
All right, folks, welcome to the Gritty Bowmen podcast. I'm here in Salt Lake City with Traeger. And for those of you who don't know about Traeger grills, you need to climb out from under the rock you're living under and get with the program because you guys make some pretty awesome grills. And at Gritty Bowmen, we're all about food and eating what we kill and that sort of thing. So I'm here with Tyler Stark. And Tyler, tell us a little bit about you.
Yeah, I'm the outdoor marketing manager here, and so I do everything outdoors. I get to go out and hunt and fish and spread the good word of Traeger through that community.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great time.
And I'm here with Chad Ward. Chad,
Yes,
you are the pitmaster, not the chef, right?
Get it right.
Yeah, so I wear a couple hats here at Traeger. As Tyler handles the outdoor marketing, I handle the barbecue marketing, and then also I'm on the pro team. I handle a lot of our PR events on the barbecue side and that type of stuff. So it's really, really a lot of fun.
How long have you been with Traeger, Chad?
I've been with them as an employee for about 5 months, but I've been with the brand for about a year and a half, 2 years.
Wow. Okay. And what is your this place is impressive.
Yes, it is.
It's impressive. I did not expect this when I was coming to check it out today. I've been, for my background, I have been eating food off the Traeger on a weekly basis, but haven't had one. So my brother-in-law and all my brother-in-laws have one. I've got 6 sisters, and so I kill stuff and then I drop it off at their house and say, "Let's come over Friday night, and I'll go to your house on Saturday night. And let's go to your house on Sunday for dinner." And they cook it up, and we eat it.
Well, that's one thing. I mean, you have to clean the game, but you don't have to clean any dishes.
Right.
That kind of works out, man.
Well,
both worlds.
But I've been told by my brother-in-law and my sisters that with a Traeger, it's hard to screw anything up. Yeah. Like they're like, you throw it in and it comes out and it's like delicious. And that's my experience. So far, I haven't had anything out of the Traeger that wasn't awesome.
Well, you know what I try to tell people, you know, and especially, you know, people that are new to it or are kind of intimidated by, you know, smoking and grilling, is it's much like just cooking in the best flavored oven you've ever cooked in. You know, because it's 100% wood fire without us having to go out there and, you know, chop down a couple of cords of wood, you know?
Yep.
And so treat it like an oven from the point of view of 250, 275, 300 degrees, but then you're creating all that flavor with the wood fire, so you're getting the heat and the flavor. And because of that convection cook, that's how you're able to retain a lot of that moisture, and you don't end up with, you know, this dry or overcooked meat.
I think that's a great point too, because especially because it is a convection style heat, not your traditional direct
explain
heat.
That to me. What is
so just like your oven would, the heat comes on, and it, unlike like say a propane grill, for example, where you have the propane gas burning right below your food that you're cooking, indirect convection heat basically allows that heat to cycle through and rotate around the cooking space to give an even cooking temperature. And you know, going back to how things taste so good off of it is because of its indirect heat. It really extends the sweet spot. I mean, Chad could probably attest for, especially on the barbecue thing, you know, and then me on the wild game side, you know, venison specifically is very finicky meat. You can either overcook it real easily or undercook it real easily. And with a Traeger, because that sweet spot of doneness is extended, if you forget it a minute or two late, you'll pick it off and you'll still have a juicy, tender piece of meat. And I think it's probably more pronounced on the barbecue side, but that's a big feature of our grill.
Yeah, it really is. And one thing I always try to kind of teach to people too, and this is more of a general cooking tip, but you notice it a lot on the Traeger, is short story I like to tell is it's been about a year ago, I was invited to come cook at Kid Rock's hunting camp up in Alabama, and show up, and we had a
party.
Yeah, dude. That guy's 100% rock star, believe me, man. It's not a put on, it's legit. And but a super down to earth guy.
Yeah.
So when I got there, he had some access deer and some huge wild turkeys he had killed, and he had brined up the wild turkey. And one thing that I like to do with game is, you know, people always have a temperature, right? Like for me, you know, something like an access deer, which you know is going to be very rich, but also, you know, a little lean.
Yeah.
When I was cooking that backstrap, I was shooting for a medium rare, 135 degrees, but I only cooked it to 128, 129 degrees internal. Because once you take and cover that and let it rest and put it in a cooler, it's going to carry over cook. So a lot of guys, and with wild game, like Tyler talked about, your margin of error is so much thinner than when you're cooking domestic product. Always take into account what that carryover cook is. And so like on the turkey breast, I like to get to, on poultry, domestic poultry that I'm cooking, I like to be around 160 degrees before I pull it off. But on that wild turkey, once again, because I knew it was a little bit leaner, I cooked it to 155, took it off the grill, covered it with some foil, put it in my Yeti cooler just to kind of relax and let all the juices redistribute. And he's like, man, this is the most moist game I've ever had. And it's twofold. One, he got all the flavor off the Traeger, and two, it was because I was taking into account that carryover cook and what would happen with it.
Nice. Okay. That's something I didn't know. Mm-hmm. So what is it about the smoking that gives it that taste? Like, why don't you get that out of is it just the type of woods flavor the meat?
Yeah, so we offer numerous different types of woods, and it's really the way the wood combusts in the grill, if you will. Mm-hmm. So a lot of times, let's take an old-fashioned stick burner, you know, where somebody's got their barrel and off to the side they've got their firebox.
Like an
right?
offset smoker.
Offset smoker, typical one. Well, the problem is that smoker always runs hot and cold, hot and cold, hot and cold.
Yeah.
And you're putting on, even if you've got nice dry wood, there's a certain time where that wood's having to actually burn off to get to embers. And during that burn off cycle, you get a lot of impurities, and you'll notice you get a darker, what we call a dirtier smoke. That's not good for food because it's got a little bit of creosote in it, which is going to give you some off flavors. You don't have to worry about that with the Traeger. You always get that nice, what we call blue smoke, which is clean smoke. The longer smoke hangs around, the more dirty molecules it picks up. And those dirty molecules, when they transfer to the food, don't taste well at all.
I see.
So it's a lot about how the Traeger, the convection air, the way it runs, and the way the actual fire combusts down in the fire pot.
So when I was talking to Tyler earlier, I was saying something like, you know, I was asking about the wood pellets themselves because I'm like this natural guy, right? So the wood pellets kind of freak me out. I start to think, this isn't natural. They're pellets, right? So what kind of glues are in them, and what have you done to press them, and all that kind of stuff. Well, Tyler dropped some knowledge, and can you explain that to the Gritty Bowmen people? Like, what is it about your pellets?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we're the only wood pellet grill manufacturer that actually owns all of our mills. We have 4 pellet mills across the country, and we set them up right next to virgin lumber mills. And so what that allows us to do is really maintain a strict quality control. We're buying wood direct from the source, not like a furniture plant or anything. We're buying untreated, chemical wood, and we're putting it into our pellets. We use a food-grade soybean oil to help lubricate our dyes, but the pellets are formed naturally by the heat and pressure.
When you
of
say
those
dyes, you're not talking about coloring dyes. You're talking about dyes, molds.
Correct,
Yes.
a mold. Yeah,
The molds.
yeah. It's basically a big disc with a bunch of pin-sized holes in it, and we take this raw sawdust material and we push it through high pressure through these holes, and the heat that comes out of that pressure naturally glues the wood together. There's a material in the wood called lignans, and it acts like a natural glue when it's heated up. And so when you see the pellet, it looks like it has like a glaze over it, but that's just the pressure and the heat that is going through the die that gives it that appearance, and it's naturally bound together by its own
substances.
Exactly.
And if you want to sound really smart at the next big outdoor game cookout, just use the term high heat extrusion.
Yeah.
And that's really
And we're
what
golden.
Tyler just described is that high heat extrusion that allows us to have a 100% natural pellet, so you're not getting any off flavors or anything like that. But it's also key to people that are new to wood fired cooking. You need to use a food grade pellet. You know, if you go use a heating stove pellet, that's where you start getting into treated woods and those type of things. So anybody that may have a wood burning stove at the house and then says, well, I'm going to get me a pellet grill and I'll just use the same pellets. No.
Bad idea.
You take a real chance of making yourself and your guests sick.
Yep.
Okay. So what is it about the pellets and the Traeger grill that makes it, because from what my brother-in-law is like, dude, I just set the temperature and I leave for 3 hours. I come back, it's done.
Yeah.
You're talking about an offset smoker. You're putting wood in there. It's getting too hot. It's getting too cold. Yeah. Like there's a whole different ball game. Describe to people how that Traeger works and why it's different.
Yeah, sure. So the thing that you're looking for is meat likes to cook at a consistent temperature. It doesn't like ups and downs, whether it be wild game, whether it be domestically raised product, whatever it is. It just doesn't like those temperature swings. So with the Traeger swings less than your oven does inside your house. Depending on which one you have, you may, if you set it 225, you walk outside, it may be 217, it may be 232. But it's always in that really what I call variable sweet spot.
Okay.
And the way it works is we're just sitting there and based on the temperature in the pit, so we've got a thermometer right inside of the left there. So based on the temperature in the pit and the temperature you have the controller set at, we're just going to regulate the feeding of pellets. So let's say you're at 225 and you walked out there and it's 232. It's probably because the pellets were just augered into the fire pot within the last 5 to 6 seconds. If you see it at 217, it's probably because that augering of the next batch of pellets is about to come. So that's why you have kind of that. Really, your job is to set the temperature, keep an eye on the internal temperature, which we make easy for you. On our Pro Series, we've got 2 built-in meat probes. You don't even have to open the grill. You can just click the silver button, and it shows you probe 1 and probe 2 temps.
Yeah.
Yep.
So really, your job is to have a nice cold adult beverage and don't let it run out of pellets. And it's a big enough hopper that, depending on what temps you're cooking at, the hopper is going to last you numerous hours.
Yeah.
And so, and the other thing I really like about the Traeger, especially for people that are just getting into or trying to take their smoking game to the next level, it is very, very difficult to over-smoke food. There's so many times when you talk to people about, bringing barbecue, like, I don't like smoke. I don't like. Well, it's usually because they've ate off that stick burner that has that dirty smoke, and they're used to that kind of creosote taste. Whereas a Traeger, man, you can put a pork butt or a brisket on there for 12, 14 hours, and it's not going to get too much smoke. I always say food off a Traeger is really like smoke-kissed, not smoke-drenched.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, I've hunted a lot of bear, and I love bear meat. And it's got some, like the bears I've shot, they've got a lot of fat in them and stuff. And so I've heard like Stephen Ranilla, a meat eater, talk about cooking a bear rump, and and a lot like pork and stuff like that. And with same problem you have with bear that you have with pork is the risk of trichinosis, which is pretty real since my brother got it eating the same bear. Stupid idiot. Sorry, Brent, but that's another podcast we've covered in the past. But so getting that temperature up is really important because I don't want any parasites, but I love this meat. And what I've done at times, I've got my thermometer. I'm sticking it in there. I'm trying to pan frying it. It doesn't work. It turns into a piece of shoe leather. So a lot of times we will throw it in a crock pot and slow cook it. But the problem a lot of times there is, at least in my experience, the meat loses its flavor. It's
cook the flavor out of it.
It's in the water now. And so now I'm putting the juices back on the meat, trying to rehydrate it. But it doesn't. But then we throw it in a Traeger and it's super good. So what's that about?
That's a great question. It's probably a combination of the smoke. I mean, smoking food definitely has different characteristics or lends itself to different characteristics than, say, searing a piece of steak. A slow smoke really helps seal in that moisture. So, that smoke will encapsulate the meat. It will kind of lock in that moisture. And unlike a direct flame where it could overheat that and burn that moisture out, that smoke really helps seal that in. And so so you won't have to baste it as often, most likely. Bear is a little fattier on some of the game meats too, so I think a lot of the fat content helps. That's the biggest thing with the wild game is how lean they are, and especially on a barbecue or low and slow cook, it's all about rendering those fats down. And so a fattier piece of meat could also help with that too. That low, slow cook really gets that juice in there.
So I've heard you cook like a bear ham the same way you do a pork. So if that's the case, walk me through, Chad, how you would cook a pork butt.
Okay. So a couple of things. One, getting back to your crock pot thing. If you think about all a crock pot is, it's a heating element. So it's just a heating element that's putting out either this many ohms, that many ohms, or that many ohms of energy, depending on if you got it on low, medium, or high. So it's that, once again, that we stay away from. It's that direct source where you just have this meat or this heat right on top of the meat. So that's one of the reasons that you get that high intensity of heat right here in this focused area, and it just lends itself to drying things out and cooking out the flavor.
Got it.
But if we're going to take a ham like that, for instance, it really depends on what you want to do with it. Do you want to slice it and serve it as sliced, or do you want to serve it as more of a pulled? And I can give you both. You don't have to make a decision.
Okay.
I'll do that. Throw that in for free.
Because I like them both.
So if we're going for the slice, what I like to do is we have two products that we built for the outdoor enthusiast. It's our big game pellet, which is beautiful. It's a combination of red oak, white oak, hickory, and rosemary.
You told me about that.
And dude, when that smoker's going with a nice big piece of wild game on there, and you can catch that little bit of rosemary with those what I call hardier woods, it's awesome. We also came out with a big game rub, which I'm jealous of Tyler because it falls into his outdoor channel, but I think it's like one of the best all-purpose barbecue rubs.
I think you guys have used that everywhere.
Oh man, I use it in competitions on brisket and ribs because it's got the trifecta, as I call it.
Okay.
It's got the little bit of salt, which you always need some salt to. Salt makes the flavor of the meat stand up. You know what I'm saying? It just brings it out. It's a natural flavor enhancer. It's got savory, so you've got your herbs in there. You kind of just that down home, and then it's got that little bit of sweet on the end.
Yeah.
And we use a turbinado sugar in that rub. And the reason turbinado sugar, the brand of turbinado sugar you see more than anything is sugar in the raw. And one thing to always know about sugar when you're cooking with it, the less refined a sugar, the better it is for outdoor cooking. Because the less refined it is, the higher the melt point is. So a lot of times you'll see guys use a really fine brown sugar in a rub, and they'll start having these burnt spots all over the outside of their meat. That's because it has such a low melt point that the sugar doesn't melt. It just caramelizes and burns.
I see.
So that's something to always take into consideration on these longer cooks like we're about to talk about. Yeah. So I like to, on the Traeger, we go from a smoke setting of 180 up to 450 degrees. And what I would do with that, either way, if I'm cooking it, for sliced or pulled, I would start it out, I'd rub it down, and then I like to let it set out for an hour at room temperature. A lot of guys will use binders like olive oil or mustard or something like that to get the rub to stick. I would rather just do it naturally. So rub it down, season it up really good, and just let it sit on the counter for an hour. And what you'll notice when you come back is this slurry kind of on the outside of the meat, and it's kind of worked its way into that first, 16th or 8th of an inch.
It's like a chemistry class, really. Like food is just chemistry.
It's redneck chemistry, of course.
Yeah, you're putting that stuff on there, and it's doing its chemistry thing. You come back. How long do you wait?
So about an hour.
Okay.
And then I've got my big game pellets. I've got my Traeger already fired up, and I put it on the smoke setting. So that smoke setting, we're providing more pellets more frequently into the fire pot. And what that does, it's creating a heavier smoke. And so I'm going to smoke a big piece like that at 180 for about 3 hours. And then once it's got all that smoke on it, and I feel like it's looking good, it's starting to form a little bit of a bark between the smoke and the rub, then I'm worried about just cooking it. So that's when I move it up to 275 degrees. And what I will do is if I'm going to cook it for sliced, I'll take it right up to about 100, especially because of the organisms and wild game. I'll take it to probably about 165. So that way we know everything's dead, and I'll immediately pull it off. And the one thing to do before you put it in your Yeti or whatever cooler you're using is let it vent. Let it stop the cooking process a bit. Then wrap it up some foil and let it rest. A big cut like that, I like for it to rest at least 30 minutes.
So before you wrap it in foil, how long do you let it sit?
Usually, what I always say is till the steam comes off of it.
Okay.
Which is about 10 to 15 minutes, usually on a bigger cut.
Got it.
So you're just trying to stop that cooking process so that your carryover cooks only a couple of degrees and not 10 or 12 degrees.
Got it.
And it keeps cooking in that, well-insulated cooler.
Yeah. So what's I'm sorry to interrupt, but I'm curious, like you've mentioned this a couple times now, putting it in the cooler, wrapping it in foil. What's that about?
It's about allowing the redistribution of the juices. So think about it. When you've got this meat and you get it hot, you've got all these water molecules just bouncing around. Well, if you take it off the smoker and put a knife to it, guess where all those water molecules are about to bounce to?
They just
your
leak
cutting
out.
board.
Yeah.
You're going to need about half a roll of paper towels to clean all that. But that's all your flavor. And you don't want it to go there. Like the crock pot, you don't want it in the bowl or on the board. You want it in your belly. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so when you allow it to rest like that, all those juices kind of redistribute and get reabsorbed by the meat. So that way when you slice it, the moisture maintains.
That's what I do with a steak, like an elk steak. If I just pan sear it 1 minute on each side, I kind of pull it off. I like it really rare.
Yep.
But I'll let it sit for a minute or two before I cut into it, because if I don't, then all the juices just come right out.
Same exact principle.
Okay.
Just on a bigger cut, you need more time to allow the redistribution.
And so when you wrap it in foil and put it in a cooler, it allows it to stay warm?
Yeah, it'll still stay warm, so you're going to stay above 140 degrees, so you don't have any issue with serving it cold or any post-cook bacteria building. But it allows those juices to redistribute.
Got it. Okay.
And the only difference I would do on the, we pulled it off at 165 if we want to slice it and serve it that way. Mm-hmm. If we want to cook it pulled, then I'm going to take it and cover it in foil at 165 degrees, and I'm going to put it back on the smoker at 275. And then once it reaches about 195 degrees, take it off, vent the foil, let all the steam get off of it, and then once again let it rest. And then you should be able to get in there with tongs or forks or bear claws and pull it all apart, hit it with a little bit of big game rub when it's really hot, and a little bit of sauce, and toss it all together and toast you off a couple of buns, and you're going to be the hit of the neighborhood, my friend.
So how come you do it like that versus if you're going to cut it?
So you want if you're going to slice it, you want it to hold together, so you're just pulling it off at a temperature to where you haven't broke down all the muscle fibers.
I got it.
But if you want it pulled, you want that consistency of pulled meat, you got to break down some more of those muscle fibers to get that.
So it's still, if you're slicing it, you're just making it so it doesn't just crumble to pieces.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay. Wow. Learn something new every day. Okay. So what's your favorite? We were kind of offline before we got started. The favorite thing that I eat off of the Traeger grill that I'm always asking my brother-in-law to cook up for me is brisket. Now, I hate brisket just about anywhere else. It's like trying to chew on a bone or a piece of leather. He and so the first time he invited me over to get it, I was like, yeah, honey, we're going over to have some beef brisket with Bryce and Katie, but you don't have to eat it.
Yeah.
We get over there, though, and it just melts in your mouth. So what is it about that? And he told me he cooked it a long time.
Yeah, and it depends. There's a couple ways to accomplish it. I'm kind of on the other end. I cook my brisket relatively quick. First off, with brisket, one big thing about it is the cut of meat you start with. The USDA really has 3 grades of meat: select, never cook a select brisket, and they get the grades based off the marbling in the ribeye, but it directly correlates to how much marbling is in the brisket also.
Okay.
You never want to cook a select brisket.
And that is because?
It just doesn't have much fat in it.
Okay.
So it's going to dry out really quick. It's going to be tough to deal with.
Okay.
You have a choice brisket, which is pretty good. That's what you're going to find middle of the road. Here lately, you've been able to find like prime briskets at Costco. And if you can pick that up for $350, $360 a pound, that's what you want to cook.
Okay.
A prime brisket's great if you're on that budget. Now, let's say you've had a good year and you want to cook the creme de la creme. Here at Traeger, we're partners with Snake River Farms. Uh-huh. Snake River Farms has an American Wagyu beef brisket that is absolutely phenomenal. Tyler, you've ate a couple of them. They're so much fun to cook. I mean, the marbling in them is unreal, and it's really, really tasty. I mean, they're a great brisket. So usually I'm cooking a Snake River Farms brisket, and one thing you have to remember, if you look at that full brisket, it's called a packer brisket. And in that packer brisket is actually 2 cuts of meat. You've got the bottom, which is the point. So there's the point on the bottom, then there's this layer of fat that goes all the way through, and then the very top is what they call the flat. The flat is a lot leaner than the point. So me personally, I separate those 2 pieces of meat before I even start the cooking process.
Okay.
Because the point's going to be used for my burn ends, and the flat is going to be used for my slices.
What's a burn end?
So a burn end is when it's all said and done, it ends up being a 1x1 cube that comes out of the point. And because of the way we cook it, it's kind of got bark all the way around it, and then you hit it with a little bit of barbecue sauce and some turbinado sugar and put it back on the Traeger for about 45 minutes. I call it meat candy, man. It is, I've been all over the country doing barbecue classes, and we serve burn-ins, sliced brisket, chicken, pork, ribs. And everybody, when it comes down to the end of the day, what was your favorite? Overwhelmingly, it's always the burn-in, man. And once again, though, I think it's because you've had so many people scarred by restaurant brisket.
Yeah.
But it's one of those, man. I cook it. I separate the 2, season them down. Big game is awesome on brisket. The big game rub here at Traeger. And then let it set for an hour. Once again, just kind of do its thing.
Yep.
And it's very similar to how I cooked the bear roast. 180 degrees for 3 hours. Starts getting a nice bark, nice smoke penetration. And then what I do is I like my brisket to have the color of a fine furniture, man. I kind of like that deep mahogany.
Yeah.
And so usually somewhere between 160 and 170 degrees internal, it has that color to it. And once it has that color, at that point, your job is to get it cooked to a doneness that you don't dry it out. And what helps with that? Wrapping it in foil. So I wrap it in foil, I move the smoker to 275 degrees, and if I'm cooking a Wagyu brisket, because it has more fat, you need to take it to a little higher temperature. Because if you don't, you're not going to render all that fat out, and it's going to taste a little bit rancid. So if you're cooking a leaner brisket, like a choice brisket, those are usually done to me around 195 to 199 degrees. But if I'm cooking a Snake River Wagyu brisket, it's going to finish off somewhere around 203 to 207.
Okay.
And the reason I give you a range is I don't determine when my brisket's done based off of temperature. I do it based off of feel. And the reason is every animal's lived a different life. Some have been country club, and some have been out pulling, wagons.
Right.
And depending on how much that chest muscle's been used, it may take a little bit longer to break down.
Interesting.
And so what I do is once it gets in that temperature range, I take my instant read thermometer and I slide it in the meat. And what I'm looking for when I slide that thermometer in the meat is kind of the equivalent of the feel if we were to take a stick of butter here and just lay it out at room temp for about 4 hours. You slide it in there, it should slide in really easy, but with just a little bit of resistance at the end.
Yeah.
And the reason you want that resistance is because it's going to cook another 3 or 4 degrees while we're holding it.
Right after you take it off.
Yeah, and that's my brisket playbook, if you will.
Got it.
Always remember, sliced brisket, always, always, always cut it against the grain. There is nothing more sad than watching a young man or a young lady spend 10, 12 hours cooking a brisket, let it rest, do everything right, and then pick up the knife and cut it with the grain. Because when you cut beef with the grain, it's just going to be chewy, chewy, chewy. So always against the grain.
Okay. And then what do you, where can people find these sort of recipes and stuff? Like,
dude, TraegerGrills.com is the largest database of recipes for any grill company. What are we at, Tyler? Close to 3,000?
Probably at least, if not further. I was going to also say on social, Traeger Recipes on Instagram is also a good spot. We do daily recipe posts on there, so we do a lot to our community to help get recipes. We also have a weekly email blast that people can opt in for, where you'll get different recipes and content coming out through that too. So we do a lot from the recipe support standpoint.
And the cool thing is it's a great mix. Yeah. You know, each month you're going to get 10 barbecue recipes, you're going to get 10 outdoor recipes, you're going to get 10 culinary recipes. So it's not like we're going to hit you with all barbecue or all outdoors or all culinary. You know, we hit it hard all the way across.
What's your favorite non-meat thing to cook on Traeger? Because we were talking about that earlier too. People kind of think, oh, meat. It just cooks meat. But it's not true.
I'll let you take it first.
I'm going to tell you, especially since it's coming up, I love pumpkin pie off the Traeger. Something about the smoke going into the pumpkin just is phenomenal. So baking sweets and pies and cookies is something that the Traeger does surprisingly well, and it really adds a different taste element that you wouldn't expect.
Mine's just as left field. Lasagna.
Ooh.
Oh, yeah.
You take a nice homemade lasagna, and instead of throwing it in the oven at 350, you put it on the Traeger at 350. And you have all that ricotta and mozzarella pick up that smoke flavor, and it is absolutely amazing. So, it's you know, and we see people go so many places with their Traeger. You know, cookies, pies, like I was saying, lasagna. One of the best things that I love doing on it. Usually, I'll have my parents and my niece and everybody over on a Sunday after a barbecue competition. Dude, I've been cooking for 36 hours. I don't want to really fire up and cook anything protein-wise. But I'll stop by. We've got a great little take and bake pizza shop. Mm-hmm. You set your Traeger to 375, put a take and bake pizza on it, and it kind of just crisp up that crust a little bit and gets a little bit of smoke in the cheese, 15, 20 minutes. It's phenomenal.
Huh. Dude,
I'm getting hungry now.
I've been hungry since I walked through the door. So let's say a guy wants to get started with Traeger. First of all, what kind of grill should the guy go and buy? You have a number of options. Like, what does the guy get? Especially, like, our audience is mostly hunting big game, elk, deer, What does he get?
Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say my two favorite models, specifically speaking to the outdoorsman, would be either the Tailgater, which is it's a 20-inch grilling surface. It's perfect for taking to camp. But the Pro 34 would be my choice for your at-home model, especially if you're cooking big back straps or big ribs. That grill is the perfect thing for a massive amount of meat.
Yeah, and for barbecue guys, I'm the same way. Pro 34, and tying into the outdoors. I mean, me and John Dudley cooked a whole hog on a 34 that he had just harvested down in Florida. And, we got it all cleaned up and ready to go. And the next day, man, we fit her on there. She was 65 pounds, dressed out about 40 pounds. And we had a great time, about 9 hours on the Pro 34, and it was tasty. So I always think you got to look at, the one regret, because I'm also a store owner. I've got my own barbecue store where I sell Traegers and other things. And the one regret I always hear from somebody that buys a Traeger is, I just wish I'd have got the next bigger size.
Yeah,
that's true. Yeah.
So just keep that in mind when you're doing it. Also, buy from a lot of retailers like myself have a trade-in program. So let's say you do, maybe you don't have the extra $200 for the 34, so you got to get a 22. But hey, you cook on it for a year, you fall in love with it, you got a little extra scratch in your pocket. I'm going to give you something towards that new grill. Because people are always wanting to get into the pellet business and try it out. So
yeah.
I don't mind working with guys on things like that.
Nice. That's a good point. So the next question is, what does a guy cook on it? Like for the first time, getting the hang of it. Like, let's say he's a little bit. What can he do where he can't fail?
Well, we give you a great cookbook that comes with the grill. So when you open it up out of the box, you have a cookbook that tells you how to do everything from, vegetables to desserts and baked goods. My first thing I actually did is I really wanted to do a low and slow. And I think some of the low and slow stuff is really easy for the beginner to get going and trying out. If they, at least my experience when I got into the Traeger is I wanted to try that more traditional barbecue stuff. And so that pulled pork was my first dish. It's a very simple dish to prep and cook. And it's a good experience for that low and slow. I mean, I've done multiple things like burgers and dogs and things like that are also very easy. But I think if you're going to do it, you should go and see really what that grill has. And a simple recipe for me, like pork, was my first choice.
I always recommend if somebody wants to start out with low and slow, pulled pork is by far the most forgiving.
It's kind of one of the best tasting stuff out there, too.
It's hard to mess up.
Yeah. And one thing I always tell people, too, when they're making that switch from a propane grill to a Traeger, is start lowering your cook temperatures. It's like when people cook burgers on a propane grill, they're usually cooking it for 4 or 5 minutes each side, and they're done with it. It has no flavor, flat as hell. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? But on a Traeger, drop that temperature about 275 degrees and cook that burger for 20, 25 minutes. Because now it's going to soak up some of that smoke, and it's going to be a much moister, much tastier burger. So I would say if people decide to do more of a grilling item to start with, drop that temp a little bit and stay out of that, 350, 375, 400. Go down to that 250, 275. It's going to take a little bit longer, but it's definitely going to pay dividends when you take that first bite.
Nice. All right. Any shout-outs you want to do before we wrap this up? I had a great time. And for folks that are watching or listening to the podcast, if they go check out YouTube, they'll see some B-roll of the place, some extra video of Traeger, the different models. We'll cut those into the podcast so people can see that. But anything you want to mention?
No, I was just going to say thanks for so much for your time today. I'm glad we were able to have you guys out here, and check out our website. It's TraegerGrills.com. Follow us on social. It's Traeger Grills on Facebook, and then we have a number of them on Instagram as well. But we've got some great content, great resources for people that are wanting to learn and understand what a pellet grill is all about, and even just get some recipe inspiration for their next cooks.
Chad, where can people get a hold of you? Like if they want to learn how to barbecue, if they want to step up their game?
Absolutely, man. First off, I would echo what Tyler says. I mean, I don't think you'll find a grill brand with more dedication to social media and what we do. There's a group of 20 people here behind us that their only job, and we're part of it, is how we communicate with the customer and how we share the Traeger love. So definitely hit us up. If you want to hit me up personally, Chad Ward on Facebook, and then everywhere else it's whiskeybentbbq. Whiskeybentbbq.
Whiskeybentbbq.
So that's on Instagram, Twitter, and whiskeybentbbqsupply on Facebook. So that's where you can do it. And I try to post a lot of stuff and kind of keep up with my travels. And if you got any questions, direct message me, and I'll usually get you an answer.
Awesome.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, thanks, guys.
Dude,
appreciate
thank
it. Thank you. Friends, hunters, outdoorsmen, lend me your ears. Please take this moment to listen to this excerpt from the Gritty Bowmen film, Back to Traditions. Despite our ever-changing, ever-indignant world with its growing ignorance of and indifference to the ways of the wild, I remain a predator, pitying those who revel in artificiality and synthetic success while regarding me and my kind as relics of a time and place no longer valued or understood. I stalk a real world of dark wood and tall grass stirred by a restless wind blowing across sunlit water and beneath star-strewn sky. And on those occasions when I choose to kill, to claim some small part of nature's bounty for my own, I do so by choice, quickly, with the learned efficiency of a skilled hunter. Further, in my heart and mind, I know the truth and make no apologies for my actions or my place and time. Others around me may opt to eat only plants, nuts, and fruits. Still others may employ faceless strangers to procure their meats, their leather, their feathers, and all those niceties and necessities of life. Such is their right, of course, and I wish them well. All I ask in return is no one begrudge me, and all of us who may answer the primordial stirrings within our hunter souls, my right to do some of these things myself. What you just heard is a quote from M.R. James. We truly live in a world that is largely ignorant and indifferent to the ways of the wild. And although some regard us as relics of a time and place no longer valued or understood, we have the opportunity to change the way these people view the hunter and the hunt. We can share our experiences and nature's bounty with those who employ these faceless strangers. And by so doing, we make a difference, not just for ourselves, but for the wild animals in the wild places we care so deeply about. Never stop sharing your passion for hunting and the outdoors. Our wild animals and our wild places depend on it. We want to thank Kifaru, Mountain Ops, Hoyt, Vortex, Phelps, Black Eagle Arrows, and Crispy Boots for supporting the Gritty Bowmen. We love these companies and the people behind them. They truly make fantastic products. Please support them whenever you can. And as always, good luck on your hunts and stay gritty.
This is Ty Stubblefield, and you're listening to the Gritty Bowmen.
Gritty Bowmen.